all of this sort of drawing, and we'll substitute in very, very technical terms in addition to what I've already covered. And by the end of the lecture, you know, I'm going to be talking in code. It'll be very, very dense by the end of this lecture. Not because I'm trying to make it difficult, right? Because I think I know if you've been following the lectures video by video up until this point, you will understand what's being said because I will have explained it properly. I think, unfortunately, what happens in academia, and not with respect to just Intel, with the dissemination of education to adults, is that instructors, for better or worse, present the most difficult, jargon-filled, complicated structure first without giving you access to the higher concepts, and it just makes life that much harder. Me, I do it the other way around. Let's talk bootleg first, let's talk ghetto real, first, make sense of it, and then once I feel that you, and you know, it's weird because I don't see anybody, I'm talking to my camera, but you know, I try to stay in tune with, you know, I just stay in tune with, I don't know, something. But if you've been following me at this point, by the end of this lecture, the suggestions that I've made, the analysis that I've given, I think is a very good contemporary account of the intelligence community, and a lot of you will have a much higher understanding of the intelligence architecture within the United States, which I think is just good. You know, the more educated a population is, the better and the more well-informed we are when it comes to decision making. Right now, you know, when you go to the polls, when you read your books, when you're browsing the net and you come across stuff, oh yeah, I remember that means that, and okay, now I see where this ties in, and blah 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 blah. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so we got the generic, sort of general stuff out of the way. Now let's slowly start to get into the nitty-gritty and connect this to the information that I've already discussed in the past 2.5, 3 hours of lecture. There is a sense in which we need to create, and I erased it, I probably should have kept that up, right? We need to create, remember I had this, and then I had this, right? And then we had like the flow of data. Actually, I'll keep this up because this is good. But actually, let me do this. I probably should have drawn this, right? But I just thought of it. Actually, let's lock it off. And then, we do this. Okay, that's what we're talking about, right? There's a barrier between the public and the intelligence community. And I talked about the 16 different branches of the intelligence community already. The intelligence community now has, and actually this would extend upwards, right? The intelligence community now has a barrier in which, if you can think of like, the internet would be everybody, the intra, I-N-T-R-A, would just be internal. This would be an intra, right? This model would be an I-N-T-R-A, right? This would be an intel sharing or dissemination capability, to be technical, right? It's intra within the government. There is a closed system in which information can cycle through, not intelligence cycle, but the information of intelligence, and I have to be careful with cycle, but dissemination, right? The dissemination of the sharing of the intelligence can flow freely between the FBI, CIA, blah, 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 and WikiLeaks guys or whoever. And I'm not knocking the WikiLeaks guys, you know, that's not for me to do, but I'm just as an example, right? The WikiLeaks guys and other dudes can't come in and just grab and intercept that information, right? Because that information is completely closed off. This sort of structure, in a conceptual sense, is the ISE, right? The Information Sharing Environment. ISE, right? And the ISE stands for and this is super general, so you have an understanding, right? The information sharing, right? The information sharing, and I think the emphasis is on, well, all of it. Every word is important. But the environment, right? The environment in which it is conducive for us to share this information. Prior, in attempting to share information interagency, interdepartmentally, we've had lapses in the sharing of information. Now, our information can be shared properly because we've structured an environment. We've deliberately not thought about, and this is what's important to recognize, right? We're not talking at this level, and soon it'll get even deeper, but at this level, we're not talking about the actual intel. We're not talking about the data. We're not talking about the information. We're not talking about informants. We're not talking about collectors. We're not talking about sources. We're talking about, put all of that aside. We're talking about, let's conceptualize a system in which that information, whatever that information might be, can be effectively shared interdepartmentally without outside threat, or with a minimized or reduced outside threat, right? So that's what we're talking about. And here's the quote: the ISE must, this is a quote from 39, it's from the ISE.gov page, the ISE, information sharing environment, must, to the extent possible, right, as much as we can, be supported by common standards. And this is important, right? Be supported by common standards that maximize the acquisition, access, retention, production, use, management, and sharing of terrorism information, right? The important word in that is standards, right? Be supported by common standards. So, this is where I have to put on my logical hat, right? If we recognize, so it's a hypothetical, right? A conditional rather. If we recognize that there is information, intelligence out there, and we recognize that we have to have an environment in which this information is successfully shared, then we recognize that we need to create this environment, right? The creation of that environment is going to require a standardization in which I can talk to you, and you can talk to me, and we can talk to each other, right? So, within science, for example, the scientific community, despite the fact that you're a scientist in Japan, and you're a scientist in China, and you're a scientist in Germany, and I'm a scientist in the United States of America, we all deal with numbers. We all reference the same formulas. The formulas I use in the US are the same formulas you use in Japan. The numbers that I use in the United States of America are the same numbers that you use in China, right? There is a standardization, numerical standardization, formulaic standardization within the scientific community that allows scientists in whatever different region, whatever different part of the world to be able to communicate on the same level. And one of the facets, if not the most important aspect, I'm not going to get into it because it's tangential, of the scientific method is reproducibility. The attempt to reproduce findings in this lab. In this lab, my finding was X. You need to follow the same exact conditions that I had. I send you the recipe book, and you need to arrive at X. If you follow my recipe and you arrive at X, your arriving at X reproduces my findings, validates my findings, but also is only possible because we share the same standard, right? I say 4 ounces, you use 4 ounces. You know what an ounce is, or it would be whatever, right? You do your conversions from ounces to whatever everybody else uses, right? And I should know, but I'm not in that frame of mind right now. Okay, so you get the idea, a standardization. So we need to create a standardization just like the scientific community has, and it has to be adopted by all members of the intelligence community. And insofar as we have this standardization, that standardization will allow us to be able to communicate between each other. So roughly, if you want to look at it logically, it's something like this. If we're going to talk about sharing intelligence, right? If we're going to talk about sharing intelligence, we recognize that this is where we're trying to go. This is the conclusion. Sharing intelligence is the consequence. What is the antecedent? What is the thing that we need to satisfy in order to talk about sharing intelligence? The topic of this lecture is info sharing, sharing intelligence. How do we go about sharing intelligence? Well, the first thing that we recognize, as specified in this first line, is that we need to have the proper environment. Right? We need to create this red box. Right? We need to create a proper environment, a framework. But that environment is itself contingent on something else, right? That environment is itself contingent on